Guys, welcome back. This is the Whittle Podcast with Jay Breezy, your host. Today we are joined by some founding members of the Whittle family. Today we have my mother, the my spawn point, the birther of me, I guess. Mom, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hey, Mom Little, a very spawn point here on the podcast.
We're also joined here today by my loving father, the founding father, the first nut. Introduce yourself, Dad.
I had some great introductions in my past. That was very, very unique.
Today we have two of the most educated people in my family here. We're here to talk about a speech that happened in the 1960s by the one and only Malcolm X. Democracy is hypocrisy. Now, for those of you who don't know about this speech was in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. There was a lot of segregation, protests, and a lot of colors fighting for even basic rights. Have you guys ever looked into the podcast, Mom, Dad? Have any of you read it, done an assignment on it? What's your knowledge about this speech?
Well, we're born in the 70s, so this speech, as we were growing up, was studied. We studied this, I studied it in high school, I studied it in college, I even studied during my master's program. So major speech that, still to this day reverberates through the generations. So absolutely had some access to it.
Yes, I had to study it in school. As an education major, we had to take speech classes and learn about different tones and different aspects of giving speeches and what makes them strong and powerful and important. And Malcolm X was a focus because he has so many speeches and it moved just crowds and crowds and thousands of people. And him having started out as, he was educated young, but he didn't go to college or anything like that. For him to get to the level of speaker that he finally became was just amazing. So it was something that we focused on, not just his speeches, but a little bit about his history.
Okay, so let's go into the context of the speech. So his main point was to claim that America isn't or wasn't really a democracy, especially for Black Americans. And well, like I said, this was the big civil rights movement. Lots of segregation, lots of protesting, lots of people fighting for rights. Even in Malcolm X's speech, he says, "You don't have a democracy if you don't have freedom." Now, that's a pretty strong sentence. Does the context make his point stronger?
Well, you got to remember, this is the most prominent point of the civil rights era. In the 1960s, where we made so much change, there were so many other groups that were based on, Black activists, right? You had the Black Panther Party, you had Martin Luther King, and the
I had a dream.
I had a dream, and they didn't all always agree, but the context of that. That's when you think about that. What were we fighting for, right? And the United States pushed democracy. But what is really democracy? Democracy means freedom to vote, right? You have the Voting Act of 1965. You have the freedom to do and live as any other human being. The context was correct. He is speaking in terms of calling Black America to arms. Get there, the right to vote. Push. There is no freedom if you can't vote. That's not freedom. You're still considered less than a man if you can't vote, just like any other person in white America. So, to me, his context was on point. He is calling Black America to arms. Come to the gate and fight. And that's how I take it. I think it was perfect tone. The context and what we were living through during those times. I was born in 1978. And in 1964, that's not far off, So think about that. Think about what that era did for myself as a young adult and what it's doing for you now. And how did that context fit for you now as a minority?
Yeah, you have to remember, especially I was also born in the 70s. These were things that our parents and grandparents were going through. I mean, great grandparents for you, but these were all actions that our family had experienced, that they saw. So we not only heard the speeches, but we oftentimes would get firsthand knowledge or firsthand discussions about these type of things. So the context was spot on in the sense that he wasn't making things up. It wasn't far fetched. As a matter of fact, some would even argue that it was even watered down to an extent so that his point got across, and you didn't get so lost in the stories and the things that were going on at the time that you lost focus of what the main point of his speech was.
Yeah, just straight to the point.
The text was right on point. Yeah.
All right. Now, talking about his audience, he's speaking to Black Americans, people dealing with racism and waiting for change. In a speech, he said the opposed people are beginning to see hypocrisy. Who would disagree with him in that time?
No one. Black America was tired. They were tired. Constant self-doubt. They raised, when you think about, and there's a deeper story than just saying that context, right? Because Black America at that time had gone through so much, where you were redlined into these areas of living, the less than great areas of living, where they would kind of just push Black people to live because they didn't want to live amongst Blacks. White people didn't want to live amongst Blacks. So you were pushed into ghettos. You were pushed into, these lower than grade housing, and I'm talking about housing that weren't safe. You didn't have access to all these wonderful store markets like Publix and things like that. You didn't have access to that. People were tired. People were tired for getting passed up for jobs that they qualified for. You could be a physicist, have the brain of a physicist, and could only be a janitor and earn less than,
minimum wage.
And when we talk about the 60s, what's minimum wage?
$5.
Less than that. Back in '97, the minimum wage was $5.75.
Oh my God.
Or I think it was less than that. People were tired. His message came at a point where we were tired as minorities. We were tired. So, like I said, he goes about it in a militant way. That's where he differs from Martin Luther King and a lot of the other activists at that time, with the exception of the Black Panther Party, who were also militant. But Black Panther Party and Mark, as they kind of mirrored each other in a way of, we got to support ourselves, we got to build ourselves up, we got to do for ourselves, which was Black socialism. Because we were tired for waiting on white America to give us a chance, to let us rise, to let us live as any other regular human being. So I think it was right on point. He was slapping them in the face with the truth. This is what it is. Stop waiting for white America to give us what we deserve. We got to get it ourselves.
He went straight to the truth.
Yeah, it's often been said that knowledge is power, and that's not only true, but the opposite is very true. Lack of knowledge can be very powerful, and it can be powerful in a negative way. You have, and throughout history, this has happened, not just with minorities, but there have been situations where people are being fed false information, or they're fed information that feeds on a bias that they were taught that comes from no factual evidence. So,
but because they were raised on it, they assumed it to be true.
And in some cases, these were things that they were taught in school. So we're not talking just about something that their mom or grandfather or uncle would tell them. We're talking about things that were written in books. They had things written that certain minorities had smaller brains and they didn't have the capacity to think. And these lessons were taught in church. They were supposed to be looked down upon, and all these different things. And when that has gone on for decades and decades, and there's no other force, there's no other type of education that's available for those that are being talked about or those that are being put down to use to come up, they sometimes believe those things. You know, if it's in your science book, if you're getting it in church that you're supposed to be stupid, you don't have the brain power, you don't have the capacity to do certain things, and that's being told to you by everybody everywhere, you start to believe it. So you know, a lot of the things that Malcolm X did was he introduced knowledge to people that didn't have it in a way that they would understand. And in addition to that, he fed off of their frustrations and things that they saw and experienced every day to really help them open up and see and understand some of the things that he was saying, because the crowds that he was speaking to oftentimes weren't educated beyond a high school or middle school education. So, you know, for him to speak at the level and the articulation at which he was able to do, you know, you can lose the crowd. And you know, I said we studied this in public speaking. Even if you're speaking 100% truth and you're speaking the absolute best knowledge, but it's so far advanced that the person you're speaking to doesn't understand it, you've lost it. You know. Trump.
I'm just going to say this, and it might ruffle a few feathers, you know, because Trump executed this the way Malcolm X did. He catered to their fears. He catered to their anger, and spoke and speaks to this day at a level that his average supporter can, the common folk, uneducated, which who he reaches out are, you know, his bigger supporters are the highly uneducated. And he speaks like a 2-year-old, so he can relate. First sitting president that said Iran was bombed to shit on national television, and this was just recently. But who is he catering to? Because the highly educated and you know people who oppose how he does things, right?
They don't even listen to him.
We're in shock and clutching our pearls, you know, because this is the first sitting president outside of Richard Nixon who speaks like that, and this is how he executed it so well. This is why he has such a loyal following, because he talks at their level. He speaks to their fears. He speaks to their desires. Doesn't deliver, but because they feel like he's speaking to me, I am sold. I believe in him. So absolutely, as the speech, for all intents and purposes, for the time, right, for his audience, perfect.
Well, that's actually a perfect way to go into our next segment about the language of the speech. Now, Malcolm X, he used simple, as you said, simple, direct, and repetitive in his speech. Constant, this is not democracy, it's a hypocrisy. Now, do you think because he made it simple, it was stronger? Or do you think he was oversimplifying it and there was more complexity that he didn't talk about?
I think he was catering to his audience. He didn't want to overshoot. He didn't want to speak on the level that they didn't understand. But on the same token, he wasn't speaking under them. He wasn't speaking beneath them. I think his tone and the words he used and the terms he used were all things that they were familiar with. And because of that, it helped them really relate to
connect to what was actually going on.
Exactly. So that, you know, the wording he used was just on point. And you have to understand as well that some minority cultures, because they weren't very educated, there was a lot of slang, there was a lot of language and terms and things they used that, to a sense, they only used. You know, it was only recognized and understood in their community for the most part. And at that time, the greater white America, the majority in that point, you know, they didn't speak to African Americans or any other minorities in a way that they could truly, truly relate. So the only way that they saw in many cases to speak to minorities were to speak to them as if they were children, or as if, you know, on such a low level, thinking that they were making it easier for them to understand. But it was really, you know, humiliating to them. But because of the culture, they would often have to sit there and listen or tolerate being spoken to in that way. Malcolm X didn't do that. He brought the level of conversation up by using terms, things that they were familiar with, things that they saw, experiences that they've had, so that they can truly relate. So they weren't just hearing his speech, they were feeling his speech, they were relating to it. When he spoke about something, if he was speaking about something happy, they felt happy. If he was speaking about something, with excitement, if he was speaking about something sad or that they should be upset about, they felt that.
Yeah.
They didn't have to guess. Their emotions were in lock and step with the wording and the phrasing he was using. And that's what made his speeches so powerful.
I also think this, if you want to think about the power of how he spoke, the Nation of Islam at that time had the highest level of involvement and new recruitment during his tenure there before he was assassinated. He spoke outside of the realm of what the Nation of Islam was trying to do at the time. They were trying to push black nationalism, but in a nice way, in their way of saying, hey, it's just for blacks only. But they spoke about just the Nation of Islam and converting, regular black Americans to the Nation of Islam. But with
kind of like the opposite of what America was doing at the time, a little bit.
Yeah, well, the thing is that Nation of Islam really focused on black nationalism. We're us. We're going to follow the Muslim faith, and they were bringing people to the Muslim faith, and that's really what they were doing at the time. But when Malcolm X joined, he made it a bigger vision of pushing freedom for all, right, through his speeches. So they had the highest, and you can look back on the number of new recruits to the Nation of Islam to drive his message, and that's where he was at odds with the Nation of Islam at that time as well. So, think about how his speech not only impacted people in his lobby that they were listening to him, but people outside of it, people who were angry. Those are the people he spoke to. So very powerful.
Very powerful. I mean, you already talked about his delivery, very militant, very direct, intense. I mean, you already said it earlier about how his tone really matched his message to really bring forth that connection to the people he was talking to. Now, in his speech, very powerfully, he said, "You can't separate peace from freedom." Now, what do you think? Can there be peace without freedom?
No.
No.
People are always going to be fighting for equality, and I think that you can take this back all the way to the days of slavery, even before when white people were indentured slaves, right? White people were indentured slaves to the Spaniards. There was never peace. There's no peace without freedom. If you don't have freedom, you can't live equally. You're always going to want more, especially if you're the one being oppressed. I want to eat a turkey. I don't want to eat hog maws and all the pig leftovers. Right?
Yeah, I want to sit at the same table.
And you think about that. I want to sit at a table. I want to have, I want to have what they have, because you're going to always want more. That's just human nature. That's just human nature. But you're always going to be wanting more. And believe it or not, you're always going to look at what everybody else has. Well, how come they can have a warm bed and then I'm getting beat on? Am I less than a man? Am I less than an animal that I have to shepherd? Right?
Yeah, what am I missing that makes me different from them?
Also, I want to be equal. And until everyone has the freedom to be, there's never going to be peace. There's never going to be peace. There's always going to be an uprising. There's always going to be someone fighting for more.
I think that looking at it slightly different, but pretty much overall in the same light, people assume that freedom and peace and things like that
go hand in hand.
God-given right, not necessarily going hand in hand, but that they're rights, that they're supposed to have it. And nature really goes against that. If you look outside the human race, there's not peace anywhere else. I mean, you're either hunting or being hunted, or and you're some part of that food cycle or the cycle of life. It's never anywhere where it's just all tranquil everybody's getting along. I mean, you don't see rabbits and foxes, holding hands, skipping through the forest. One's hunting the other. You don't see cats and mice just, playing ping pong or whatever. You know, so peace and equality and those type of things, those are man-made inventions, man-made concepts, and they can be achieved to a certain extent, but they have to be worked for. And sometimes people aren't always willing to get put in the work. Number one, and then you have the part of human nature where if you have the power, if you're on top, very often, 99% of the times, you don't want everybody else to be on your level. And people trying to come up to your level starts to look like a threat to you. So if you're trying to say that everybody should be equal and everything should be peaceful and tranquil, that's just not a reality of mankind. It's never been like that while there's been humans on Earth that are dealing with one another. It hasn't happened throughout history. It's a marvelous concept, and I'm not sitting here saying it can't happen to a certain extent, but again, it's something that has to be worked on every day by everybody if you want it.
People are too greedy.
Yeah, and if you don't get that, then you're never going to have 100% peace. You're never going to have that tranquil, everybody's equal all the time.
Yeah. I agree with you to a certain extent because in order there to be true equality, where it's on the financial, because people think equality in terms of the right to just live, but we think about financial equality. You think about geographical equality. There's just so many things that go into it.
Yeah.
Right? And you hear it a lot when, and this happened a lot when that's what they call the red line districting, when white America would see a minority couple move into their neighborhood. It's time to go, we got to get them out. Right? So we talk about geographical equality, right? Financial equality is what's killing us most nowadays. Financial equality. Where there's things in play when you talk about the money markets and financial institutions. There's inequality there where a lot of minorities can't get the same loans that white America gets. Why? Because there's old money and there's greed associated with it. So Dad's right. It's never going to be. We're never going to get true equality. Because we'll never get true equality. There'll never really be true peace. I think.
I mean, that's pretty good. I don't really have anything to say about that. I agree with it 100%. Democracy is hypocrisy. Again, Malcolm X's favorite phrase. Does it still apply today, do you think?
Yes.
It still applies today?
Yes. I think that, and this is an unpopular opinion. Very unpopular.
Okay, lay it on us.
I think that now Black America is getting whitewashed to a certain extent.
Okay.
We see this with the
losing our black cards.
Huge numbers of and there's nothing wrong with being Republican, but huge numbers of Black conservatives that have joined the Trump era. That believe in, especially when we're going through this last voting cycle, that voted against their own interests. Right?
Switching sides.
And I think, not switching sides. I don't want to say, because everyone has a right to their political beliefs. But I think that one of the things that I saw, and sometimes I just sit and listen to young folks, even when I'm at work, and I deal with a lot of young adults under my leadership, and a lot of the things that I've noted was they don't know their history. They don't know their history. They don't know the fight that it took to get to this point. So when they sit there and say, well, racism doesn't exist, I haven't seen it. It's a pretty sad state of affairs, I think. And I think that now when you get a militant or someone that speaks like that, so if Malcolm X were to pop up now, they'd call him the angry Black man. Because they can't see it. They don't feel it like we did in the 60s, in the 70s, even in the 80s.
Yeah, so his military tone and all that, it would just been angry man screaming.
But the thing is, they're so far removed from the visible racism that they can't see the intrinsic racism. They can't see the racism behind financial institutions. They can't see why, hey, why in Fort Myers, where I work now, why is everyone being pushed over to Cape Coral and what's the other one we live by?
Um,
In this area where there's just nothing but there's no city water. There's septic tanks and well water. And the houses are incredibly cheap, but it's a huge concentration of Mexican and Haitian. While where we stayed, you had to have a credit score of damn near 800 and go through a 10-year background check and give 3 months worth of rent and have that in earnings
just to get approved.
just to get approved. And did you notice we were the only minorities
Yeah.
in that area? Did you notice that? You
Yeah.
have Canadians who own homes there. They lived there for 6 months. We were the only minorities, with the exception of one guy that lived down the street. He was a retired firefighter.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I remember that guy. Yeah.
So think about that.
Mm.
But they don't see it. They don't feel it. You know why? Because they're not living in Mexico. They're
Yeah.
not living. It's a come up. But here in the United States, there's still racism. So you get Malcolm X talking now. You bring him right now speaking the way he did, and in your face, and angry, and telling you that this hypocrisy is. I mean, democracy is hypocrisy. They won't listen to him.
Mm.
So it's a sad state of affairs. I'll tell you right now, looking at a young America, because not only is that happening, are they so far removed, but now they're erasing history. Erasing history. The little bit that we did have in our American history books. So it's up to professors and teachers, but now they're threatening them.
Yeah, wasn't it? It was a couple days ago when Ethan, my little brother, he didn't know what the KKK was. We had to explain that to him.
Yeah. They're not teaching them that. So far removed.
No, you're absolutely right. And to erase history, once again it goes back to that knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge is weakness. But when you're talking about racism and things like that, and why it seems that the country, for the most part, has come to a big standstill, there are a couple different factors. One of which you have the removal of independent thought. Everybody is trying to get along or get likes or different things like that. The focus has shifted so much, and for those that have, in this case, we're speaking more about whites in America, that it's a certain privilege that they have. But wording is important too, because when I say privilege, what you get a lot of white Americans think that when a minority is saying that they're privileged, that we're trying to say that they live a better life than us. Mm-hmm. And that's not always the case. Because you have certain privileges doesn't mean you're privileged in the sense that things are just better for you. It just means that there are certain opportunities and things like that.
Doors that are already open for you.
Right. That clear the path for you in some cases that others don't have. And they can be small things, but if you get enough small things, it really adds up to a bigger and greater privilege as a whole. Also, when you're talking about racism, the word racism has been, it's looked at so negatively, and it is a negative thing, but it's hard for whites to associate themselves with racism because it says to them internally that they're a bad person. And some things some racist things that are being done or said or thoughts that they have are coming from sources that want to keep that propaganda up, that want those divisions to exist because it benefits them in a certain way. Or, it pushes an agenda that they're trying to achieve in a certain way. So it's very hard for them to look at themselves, to look in a mirror and see certain things as, they're wronging a whole group of people. In many cases, they look at themselves as a victim. They see things like affirmative action, which was one of the devices that were being used to try to equal the playing field a bit, as an attack on them. You know, and although the numbers and data and statistics all say differently, you know, they still felt that as a personal threat. And when you're threatening somebody personal like that, sometimes logic goes out the window, and you're dealing with just emotion, because you're saying it's something, you're basically talking about them. It was a saying that it's funny. I was just listening to an audiobook, and it said this, that one fact can silence a room full of geniuses. You know, but 50 facts can't silence, you know, one dummy. You know, and I'm not saying that to say that whites are dumb or anything.
No, but I
When
see.
you're uneducated, when you don't have the knowledge, the proper knowledge, and it's backed up and reinforced by those that love you, things that you read, things that you watch, because a lot of things on TikTok and Instagram and those type of things, they cater to whatever it is you're looking at. If you're looking at elephants that have necks as long as giraffes, that's all that's going to come up on your feed. You know, as ridiculous and crazy as it is,
Fox News.
if that's what you're looking for, then that's what is going to come up. And then you have like total networks and total factors out there, factions that spend and make millions on pushing a certain narrative, whether it's true or not, just because they know they're going to get viewers and things like that. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about honesty, and it's not affecting them or their family, because the money they're making off of it puts them on a level where they're kind of shielded and blocked from that. So
that's how algorithms work too, and that's why
No.
Meta is making billions. You know, that's how Jeff Bezos with Amazon is making billions of dollars, damn near a week, based off of these algorithms that target the things you're comfortable seeing. So those are the only things you're gonna watch. They're gonna feed you. I can look at a cat meme, and that's all I see for a whole week. Right?
Yeah, like a couple pictures, and now all you get are
And that's
beach pictures.
your phone listens to you. If you talk about something
It's
around your
how
phone,
much
Now you're gonna get an ad.
But it's how much time in milliseconds, not seconds, milliseconds that you spend just seeing it. And then all of a sudden, this algorithm has shifted towards that one thing you spent just a little extra time on. And so now it's going to feed it and feed it and feed it. And that's how we became so separate as a nation. We become so polarized as a nation, because all these algorithms and all these things that are targeting you is creating such a wedge, where we have gotten to the point where everyone has voted against their own interests.
Everyone against
There is
everyone.
no gray area anymore. There isn't any Republicans and Democrats or white and blacks are willing to work with each other, because it's just so separate. We've lost that view, because all we see is what they're feeding us. So, like I said, unpopular opinion. There's a lot of things going in there.
Yeah, we kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but
Sorry.
I mean, it still connects to the speech, and whether you agree or not, this speech really makes you think. It's not about comfort; it's about awareness. So, I mean, hey, other than that, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. What would you say Malcolm X's speech is, or after talking all about it, would you say Malcolm X's speech is a good representation of public speaking? Not looking at it from the context of his speech, just the speech itself, the delivery, the language.
Absolutely.
textbook.
Textbook.
It is, I think, when you see the whole thing, because I know that.
Yeah, it is a very long speech.
Excerpts, because they have limited you can't see everything he's had to say that whole speech. You know, but even his other speeches, the Ballad of the Bullet, you know, he's had several speeches. You know, where it's great. It's to listen to him, and I think that's the fear now, because that speech itself, democracy, his hypocrisy, is not even available for you to hear. They give you excerpts of it, little bits and pieces. That's how powerful it is. That's how good it is, and that's how great he was at speeches. So I do think it's an amazing speech. Um, Definitely love his speeches. Definitely, you as a minority should, go through the history books. They have transcripts of it. They have access to full transcript. I definitely think you should spend some time reading that stuff to educate yourself for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he was an excellent public speaker. And self-taught, which just makes it that much more impressive. The fact that he was able to influence so many thousands of people and make the type of difference in the mark in history that he's made, because he taught himself in prison.
Malcolm X was in prison?
He was one of the first people I've ever heard of that read the dictionary from front to back, just so he could learn the words and the meaning of words to be able to utilize them to help not only himself but to help others. I mean, some people don't have the attention span to get through a page of reading, much less a whole dictionary.
Yeah, you couldn't catch me doing that. Maybe I should, to be honest.
Yeah, you should. It's just, oh man.
Yeah, very powerful speech. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. I'm gonna give a big thanks to my mom and my dad.
Spawn Point.
Spawn Point, the founding father, for joining this podcast episode today. And yeah, that's really it.
Appreciate you having us on.
Yay!